My name is Sarah Castellano, and I need to tell you about the envelope that destroyed my life, or saved it. I still don't know which. It arrived on a Tuesday morning in March 2019, addressed to my late husband's law office, the one I'd been slowly dismantling for 3 months since Michael died. Except Michael had been dead for almost a year by then. The envelope had no return address, just a Philadelphia postmark, and my husband's name written in block letters that looked deliberately disguised. Inside, I found a single page torn from a ledger, numbers, dates, initials, and at the bottom, in Michael's handwriting, 4 words that made my blood stop. They're watching. Trust no one. I should probably start at the beginning. Michael Castellano was a defense attorney in Philadelphia. Not a glamorous one. He worked out of a cramped office in South Philly, representing small-time criminals, occasionally taking civil cases to pay the bills. We met in law school at Temple, married young, and spent 15 years building what we thought was a modest, honest life. He died in a car accident on the Schuylkill Expressway in February 2018. A truck driver fell asleep at the wheel, crossed 3 lanes, and hit Michael's Honda head on. The driver survived with minor injuries. Michael didn't. The police investigation was routine. The medical examiner ruled it accidental. The insurance company paid out without question. I grieved, went to therapy, took a leave from my job as a paralegal, and tried to figure out how to exist in a world without the only person who'd ever really known me. Then that envelope arrived. I stood in Michael's office, dust motes floating through the March sunlight, holding a page that suggested my husband might have been involved in something that got him killed. The ledger page showed transactions spanning 18 months, ending just weeks before Michael's death, amounts ranging from $15,000 to $230,000. Initials I didn't recognize: RM, DC, TFLB. And next to each entry, a date and what looked like case numbers from the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas. I'd been a paralegal for 12 years. I knew what money laundering records looked like. My hands started shaking. I sat down in Michael's chair, the leather cracked in places, smelling faintly of his cologne, and tried to think clearly. This could be a mistake, a joke, someone trying to extort money from a widow. Except the handwriting at the bottom was definitely Michael's. I'd seen it on grocery lists, birthday cards, and post-it notes for 15 years. That was his writing. I took out my phone and photographed the page, then put the original in my purse. My first instinct was to call the police, but something stopped me. Trust no one, Michael had written. What if he meant the police? What if he'd been working with them? What if this was evidence in an ongoing investigation? And by coming forward, I'd be destroying whatever operation he'd been part of. Or what if Michael had been dirty and this ledger page was proof? That thought made me physically ill. I ran to the small bathroom attached to the office and vomited. Michael had been the most ethical person I knew. He'd turned down lucrative job offers from big firms because he didn't want to defend corporate clients he didn't believe in. He'd taken pro bono cases that kept us barely above water financially. He'd been genuinely good, hadn't he? I rinsed my mouth, looked at myself in the mirror, and made a decision. I would find out what this ledger page meant. I would investigate my own husband, and I wouldn't tell anyone until I knew the truth. I started that afternoon with the case numbers on the ledger. Pennsylvania court records are public, so I went home, opened my laptop, and began searching the Philadelphia court dockets. The first case number corresponded to Commonwealth versus Raymond Marchetti, tried in October 2016. Raymond Marchetti, R.M. He'd been charged with racketeering, extortion, and operating an illegal gambling operation. Michael hadn't been his attorney of record. A lawyer named Dennis Coyle had represented him. But according to the ledger, $15,000 had changed hands 3 days before Marchetti was acquitted. I cross-referenced the other initials and case numbers: DC, Dennis Coyle; TF, Thomas Ferraro, another defense attorney; LB, Louis Bianchi, a name I recognized from news reports about organized crime in Philadelphia. Every case involved defendants with alleged mob connections. Every case had ended in acquittal or drastically reduced charges, and according to the ledger, money had moved before or shortly after each verdict. I sat back from my laptop feeling like the floor had opened beneath me. This looked like a record of bribes or payoffs, but Michael's name wasn't on any of these cases. So why did he have this ledger page? Was he investigating these lawyers? Was he involved with them? Had he been a witness to something? I needed more information. The next morning, I called Michael's old office manager, Rita Santos. Rita had worked for Michael for 8 years before retiring 6 months before his death. She'd sent flowers to the funeral and called me a few times in the first weeks after, but we'd fallen out of touch. "Sarah," she said when she answered, surprise evident in her voice. "It's good to hear from you. How are you doing?" "I'm okay," I lied. "Rita, I need to ask you something about Michael's practice. Did he ever work on any cases involving organized crime, maybe as a consultant or expert witness?" There was a long pause. "Why are you asking?" "I found some papers while cleaning out his office. I'm just trying to understand what they mean." Another pause. When Rita spoke again, her voice had changed. Careful, measured. "Sarah, whatever you found, leave it alone. Michael wouldn't want you digging into this." My heart started pounding. "Rita, what are you talking about? Do you know something?" "I don't know anything, and neither do you. Clean out the office, sell the furniture, and move on with your life." "Rita, I'm sorry, Sarah. I have to go." She hung up. I sat staring at my phone. Rita knew something. Her fear had been palpable even through the phone line. Whatever Michael had been involved in, it had been dangerous enough that his office manager was still afraid to talk about it a year after his death. I should have stopped there. Any rational person would have stopped. Instead, I made another call. Dennis Coyle's office was in Center City, in one of those glass towers near City Hall. His receptionist put me through to his secretary, who informed me that Mr. Coyle didn't take unsolicited calls. I explained that I was the widow of Michael Castellano and needed to speak with him about a legal matter related to my husband's estate. The secretary put me on hold. 2 minutes later, Dennis Coyle picked up. "Mrs. Castellano." His voice was smooth, professional, with a faint South Philly accent he'd probably spent years trying to erase. "I was sorry to hear about Michael. We weren't close, but he had a good reputation. What can I do for you?" "I'm settling Michael's affairs and came across some documents that reference your name. I was hoping you could help me understand them." "What kind of documents?" "Financial records, case numbers. It looks like there might have been some kind of professional relationship between you and Michael that I wasn't aware of." The silence that followed lasted maybe 5 seconds, but it felt like an hour. "Mrs. Castellano, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I knew your husband by reputation only. We never worked together. If you have documents that suggest otherwise, they're either forgeries or you're misinterpreting them. The handwriting is Michael's. Then he was mistaken about something. I'm sorry I can't be more helpful. Now, if you'll excuse me. Mr. Coyle, the documents show money changing hands, significant amounts, connected to cases you worked on, cases involving organized crime defendants who walked free." I heard his breathing change. When he spoke again, His voice was different, harder. You need to be very careful about making accusations like that, Mrs. Castellano. Defamation lawsuits can be devastating, especially for someone in your financial position. My advice as an attorney is to destroy whatever papers you found and forget about this conversation for your own sake. He hung up. I sat at my kitchen table, my coffee gone cold, and realized I'd just made a terrible mistake. I'd shown my hand to someone who might be involved in whatever Michael had uncovered, and I'd done it stupidly without thinking, driven by grief and confusion and the desperate need to believe my husband had been one of the good guys. Now Dennis Coyle knew I had evidence, and he just threatened me. I looked at the ledger page still sitting on my kitchen table and noticed something I'd missed before. In the top right corner, almost invisible, was a number 127, page 127, which meant there were at least 126 other pages somewhere, a complete ledger documenting months or years of corruption, and Michael had hidden it somewhere before he died. I started noticing the car 3 days after my call with Dennis Coyle. It was a dark blue Chevy Impala, always parked within view of my apartment building in Fishtown. The first time I saw it, I didn't think anything of it. The second time I noticed it had a driver inside reading something. The third time I watched from my window as the driver, a heavy-set man in his 50s wearing a flyer's jacket, sat perfectly still for 40 minutes, not reading, not using his phone, just watching my building. I told myself I was being paranoid, but then I saw the same car parked outside the grocery store when I went shopping, and again near the bank when I went to deposit a check. The driver was different that time, younger, thinner, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast day. They were watching me. I stopped sleeping properly. Every car that parked on my street became a potential threat. Every person who walked past my apartment might be conducting surveillance. I bought blackout curtains for my bedroom. I started varying my routes when I went out. I checked constantly for cameras, listening devices, signs that someone had been in my apartment while I was gone. On the fourth night after I noticed the surveillance, someone knocked on my door at 2 a.m. I was awake, lying in bed trying to read, but mostly just listening to every sound in the building. The knock was firm, authoritative, the way police knock. I got up, put on my robe, and looked through the peephole. No one there. I waited 5 minutes before carefully opening the door with a chain still attached. An envelope lay on the floor in the hallway, plain manila, unsealed. Inside was a single photograph. It showed me standing at Michael's grave in Holy Cross Cemetery. The photo had been taken 2 days earlier, when I'd gone to visit him like I did every week. I was holding flowers, my head bowed, clearly recognizable, and written across the bottom of the photo in the same block letters as the first envelope, "Stop asking questions." I locked the door, triple-checked it, and called the police. The officer who responded was young, maybe 30, with the kind of tired eyes that suggested he'd seen everything twice. His name was Officer James Patterson. He looked at the photograph, took notes, asked if I'd been threatened directly. "Someone is following me," I told him. "There's a car that keeps showing up wherever I go. And now this photo. They know where I live. They know my routine." "Have you received any verbal threats, phone calls, text messages?" "No, but—" "Has anyone tried to enter your apartment or harm you physically?" "No, but this is clearly a threat. They're telling me to stop asking questions." Officer Patterson looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Castellano, without a direct threat or evidence of stalking behavior, there's not much we can do. It's not illegal to park on a public street or take photographs in a cemetery." I'll file a report, and if anything else happens, anything concrete, you should call us immediately. That's it? Someone is terrorizing me, and you're telling me there's nothing you can do? I'm sorry, I understand this is frightening, but we need evidence of an actual crime. My advice is to vary your routine. Be aware of your surroundings, maybe stay with friends or family for a while, and document everything. If this escalates, a pattern of behavior will help us take action. He left 20 minutes later. I stood in my apartment, still holding the photograph, and realized I was completely alone. No one was going to protect me. If I wanted to understand what happened to Michael, if I wanted to know why I was being threatened, I'd have to do it myself. I spent that night making copies of everything, the ledger page, the photograph, all my notes. I uploaded everything to a cloud storage account under a fake name. Then I wrote a detailed letter explaining what I'd found, what had happened since, and where I'd hidden the physical evidence. I sealed the letter in an envelope addressed to my sister Caroline in Boston and put it in my safe deposit box at the bank with instructions that if anything happened to me, the box should be opened and the contents delivered immediately. It was 6 a.m. when I finished. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, trying to think like Michael would have thought. He'd been meticulous, careful, strategic. If he'd acquired evidence of corruption, evidence dangerous enough to get him killed, he would have hidden it somewhere safe but accessible, somewhere I might eventually find it. Our apartment? Possible but risky. The police had been here after his death. If Michael had hidden evidence here, they might have found it. His office? Same problem. Rita had been there daily. Other people had access, a safe deposit box? Maybe, but I'd already gone through all his bank records and found no evidence of any account I didn't know about. Then I remembered something. About 6 months before Michael died, he'd spent a weekend at his uncle's cabin in the Poconos. He'd gone alone, said he needed time to think about a difficult case. He'd come back different, quieter, more preoccupied. I'd asked if everything was okay, and he'd kissed my forehead and said, I'm just trying to figure out the right thing to do. The cabin. Uncle Frank's old hunting cabin that had been sitting empty for years. Michael had inherited it when Frank died in 2015, but we'd only been there a handful of times. It was isolated up a dirt road outside a town called Cresco, surrounded by state forest. The perfect place to hide something. I decided to go that weekend. The drive to the Poconos took 2 hours. I left early Saturday morning, checking constantly to see if I was being followed. The blue Impala didn't appear, but that didn't mean I was safe. They could have multiple vehicles, multiple people watching me, or maybe they decided I wasn't enough of a threat to bother with. I hoped for the latter, but prepared for the former. The cabin sat at the end of a winding dirt road, barely visible through the bare trees. It was smaller than I remembered, maybe 800 square feet, with a tiny porch and a stone chimney. The windows were dark, the door locked. I'd brought the key that had been sitting in Michael's desk drawer for years. Inside, the cabin smelled of dust and old wood smoke. Furniture covered in sheets, mouse droppings in the corners, dead flies on the windowsills. I stood in the main room, a combination kitchen and living area, and tried to think like Michael. Where would he hide something here? The obvious places first. I checked under the mattress in the single bedroom, inside the toilet tank in the bathroom, behind books on the small bookshelf, inside the kitchen cabinets. Nothing. I moved to the less obvious places. Loose floorboards. I found 3, but the spaces beneath held only dust. Behind pictures on the walls, inside the chimney, under the porch, in the crawl space beneath the cabin where spiders made me seriously question my life choices. Nothing. I sat on the porch steps as the afternoon sun filtered through the trees, feeling defeated. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe Michael had never hidden anything here. Maybe the ledger page I'd received was part of some elaborate scheme that had nothing to do with this cabin or my husband's death. Then I looked at the woodpile. Michael had always been particular about firewood. He'd stack it just so, alternating the direction of the logs for maximum stability and air circulation. The woodpile beside the cabin was still arranged that way, despite years of weather and settling, and at the base of the pile I noticed something odd, a gap in the logs, too regular to be natural. I started moving wood. It took 15 minutes to dismantle enough of the pile to reach what was hidden underneath, a locked metal box about the size of a small briefcase, wrapped in garbage bags to protect it from moisture. My hands were shaking as I used a rock to break the lock. Inside the box I found one complete ledger, black leather cover, 312 pages, each filled with the same type of entries I'd seen on the page sent to me. Dates, amounts, initials, case numbers, years of transactions, a USB drive labeled insurance, 3 cassette tapes marked with dates from 2016 and 2017, and a letter addressed to me in Michael's handwriting. I sat on the ground, surrounded by scattered firewood, and read my dead husband's letter. "Sarah," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm probably dead. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to put you in danger, but I couldn't let this continue. I couldn't be complicit anymore." My vision blurred with tears, but I kept reading. 3 years ago, I was approached by Dennis Coyle at a bar association event. He said he had a business opportunity for me. I thought he meant referrals, maybe some consulting work. Instead, he introduced me to Raymond Marchetti and explained how their system worked. Marchetti runs most of the organized crime in Philadelphia. Nothing happens without his approval: drugs, gambling, prostitution, money laundering. But he's smart. He keeps his hands clean, uses intermediaries, and makes sure his people are protected by the best lawyers money can buy. And when I say buy, I mean literally. The system is simple. Marchetti's organization identifies vulnerable points in their prosecutions, witnesses who can be intimidated, prosecutors who can be corrupted, judges who can be influenced. The lawyers, Coyle, Ferraro, Bianchi, and others, coordinate everything. They bribe court officials, threaten witnesses, plant evidence, and destroy careers. And they launder the mob's money through their law practices, making everything look legitimate. They wanted me to join them. They offered me more money than I'd made in 5 years. I said no. I thought that would be the end of it. But they didn't give up. They started sending me clients, small-time criminals who needed representation. The clients paid in cash, always exact amounts that I later realized corresponded to entries in their money laundering scheme. They were using my firm to clean money without my knowledge or consent. By the time I figured it out, I was already implicated. They had records showing payments to my firm from known criminals. If I went to the police, I'd look like a co-conspirator. So I started documenting everything. Every transaction, every conversation I overheard, every name I could collect. I bought a voice-activated recorder and taped meetings with Coyle and the others. I photographed documents when I could. I built a case. But I don't know who to trust. There are rumors that Marchetti has people inside the Philadelphia Police Department, maybe the FBI. That's why I'm hiding this evidence instead of turning it in. I need to find someone clean, someone I can trust, to use this information without getting killed or corrupted. If I die before I can do that, it means they figured out what I was doing. It means they killed me to keep me quiet. Sarah, I need you to finish what I started. Take this evidence to someone you trust, Not the local police, not the FBI field office in Philadelphia. Go to Washington, go to the press, go to multiple sources at once so they can't silence everyone. Don't try to investigate this yourself. These people are dangerous. They've killed before and they'll kill again. I love you. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you any of this while I was alive. I thought I was protecting you by keeping you ignorant. I realize now I was just making you vulnerable. Be careful. Trust no one in Philadelphia. Michael. I read the letter 3 times, crying harder each time. Michael had been trying to do the right thing. He'd been murdered for it. And now I was in the same position he'd been in, holding evidence that could destroy powerful, violent people with no idea who I could trust to help me. I put everything back in the metal box, wrapped it carefully, and carried it to my car. Then I drove home, checking my mirrors obsessively, taking random turns and doubling back to make sure no one was following me. I made it back to my apartment around 8 p.m. The blue Impala was parked across the street, the driver visible in the dim street light. He watched me carry my overnight bag inside, but made no move to follow. They knew where I'd been. They probably knew I'd found something. I had maybe 24 hours before they decided I was too dangerous to leave alive. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with Michael's ledger, the USB drive, and the cassette tapes, trying to decide what to do. The smart thing would be to run. Pack everything, drive to Boston to stay with my sister, and figure out my next move from a safe distance. But running meant giving up any chance of justice for Michael. It meant letting Raymond Marchetti and his corrupt lawyers continue destroying lives. It meant Michael's death would be meaningless. I couldn't accept that. Around 3 a.m., I made a decision. I would listen to the tapes and view whatever was on the USB drive. I would understand the full scope of what Michael had discovered. Then I would make copies of everything and distribute them to multiple sources simultaneously: journalists, federal prosecutors, civil rights organizations. I'd make it impossible to bury the truth. The only problem was that I didn't own a cassette player. I hadn't owned one in 15 years. I searched online and found a pawn shop in Kensington that opened at 10 a.m. I would go there first thing in the morning. But first, the USB drive. I plugged it into my laptop. It contained a single folder labeled Evidence, with hundreds of files inside. Documents, photographs, scanned pages from what looked like accounting ledgers, bank statements, court filings, years of meticulously gathered proof. I spent the next 4 hours going through everything. The story that emerged was even more disturbing than I'd imagined. Raymond Marchetti's organization wasn't just a traditional mob family. It was a sophisticated criminal enterprise that had corrupted significant portions of Philadelphia's legal system. According to Michael's notes, at least 9 defense attorneys, 5 prosecutors, 3 judges, and numerous court officials were on Marchetti's payroll. The system worked like this. When someone in Marchetti's organization was arrested, the lawyers would assess the case. If the evidence was weak, they'd simply defend the client normally. But if the evidence was strong, they'd activate their network. Witnesses would be intimidated into recanting or disappearing. Evidence would go missing from police custody. Prosecutors would suddenly offer favorable plea deals or botch their cases. Judges would rule crucial evidence inadmissible or grant motions that sabotage trials. And when the defendants inevitably walked free, they'd launder money through the lawyers' firms to pay everyone off. The lawyers would report the income as legitimate legal fees. The prosecutors and judges would receive their shares through shell companies or offshore accounts. Everything looked clean on the surface. Michael's evidence documented dozens of cases over 3 years, hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes, Careers destroyed, lives ruined, a systematic dismantling of justice in Philadelphia. But the most disturbing file was labeled simply insurance policy. Inside, I found photographs of Dennis Coyle meeting with Anthony Russo, the Deputy Police Commissioner of Philadelphia. The photos showed them at a restaurant, papers spread between them, Coyle counting cash. The dates matched entries in the ledger showing $50,000 paid to someone with the initials AR. The deputy police commissioner was compromised. I stared at the screen, feeling sick. Michael had been right not to trust the Philadelphia police. The corruption went to the very top of law enforcement. I closed my laptop around 7 a.m. and lay down for an hour, though I didn't sleep. At 9, I got ready to go to the pawn shop. I put Michael's evidence in a backpack along with copies I'd made of the most crucial documents. I wouldn't let this out of my sight. The pawn shop was a claustrophobic space crammed with electronics, musical instruments, jewelry, and tools. The owner, a thin man in his 60s with nicotine-stained fingers, sold me a cassette player for $20 and looked at me like I was crazy when I insisted on testing it before leaving. The first tape started playing in my car. Michael's voice came through the cheap speaker, and I started crying before he even finished his first sentence. I missed him so much it physically hurt. November 15th, 2016, Michael said, meeting with Dennis Coyle at his office. I'm wearing a wire. He doesn't know I'm recording. The sound of a door opening, footsteps, voices greeting each other. Thanks for coming, Michael. That was Coyle, his smooth voice unmistakable. I wanted to talk to you about the Marchetti organization. You're still refusing to cooperate. I'm still refusing to commit crimes, if that's what you mean. I'm disappointed. I thought you understood the opportunity here. Do you know how much money I made last year? $700,000 from actual legal fees, not even counting the other income. You're struggling to clear 60. You could change that by helping criminals escape justice, by providing excellent legal representation. Look, Michael, I get it. You went to law school thinking you'd change the world. So did I. But the world doesn't want to be changed. It wants to keep spinning, and the people who understand that, the people who work with the system instead of against it, those are the people who succeed. You have a wife. You want kids someday. How are you going to provide for them on your current income? I'll manage. Will you? What happens when Sarah gets pregnant and needs to stop working? What happens when you want to buy a house, send your kids to good schools, take a vacation that's not camping in the Poconos? You're making choices that affect her future too, you know? There was a long pause. I could hear Michael breathing, could imagine him trying to control his anger. Don't talk about my wife. I'm just saying, think about what's best for your family. Think about... I said, don't talk about my wife. I'm leaving. Wait. Michael, wait. Okay, forget the money for a minute. Let's talk about something else. You know what happens to lawyers who get on Marchetti's bad side? Raymond is patient, but he's not forgiving. If you're going to be an obstacle, he'll remove you. Do you understand what I'm saying? Is that a threat? It's advice from someone who wants to see you live a long, prosperous life. Work with us, or at minimum, stay out of our way, because the alternative is very unpleasant. I have to go. Think about what I said, and Michael, don't do anything stupid. Don't try to be a hero. Heroes die badly in this city. The recording ended. I sat in my parked car outside the pawn shop, hands gripping the steering wheel, understanding for the first time that Michael's death hadn't been an accident. They'd killed him. Dennis Coyle and Raymond Marchetti had murdered my husband and made it look like a random traffic accident. I played the second tape. then the third. Each one documented meetings where Michael was pressured, threatened, and eventually, on the final tape, told explicitly that if he didn't cooperate, measures would be taken. The last recording was from January 2018, 1 month before Michael died. I drove home slowly, my mind spinning. I had everything I needed to destroy Marchetti's organization and everyone involved, but I still didn't know who I could trust to help me. I was one person, a widow with no law enforcement contacts and no experience investigating organized crime. If I went to the wrong person, someone on Marchetti's payroll, I'd be dead within days. When I got back to my apartment, the blue Impala was gone. That should have been a relief. Instead, it terrified me more. Why had they stopped watching? What had changed? I found out 30 minutes later when someone knocked on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw a woman in her 40s, blonde hair pulled back, wearing a business suit. She held up a badge. "Mrs. Castellano, I'm Special Agent Lisa Morrison with the FBI. I need to speak with you about your husband." I didn't open the door immediately. Instead, I called the FBI field office in Philadelphia and asked to confirm that Special Agent Lisa Morrison was an active agent. The receptionist put me on hold, then confirmed Morrison's identity and badge number. Only then did I unlock the door. Agent Morrison was tall, maybe 5'10", with sharp blue eyes that assessed me quickly and professionally. She wasn't alone. A male agent stood slightly behind her, younger, dark-skinned, with the kind of muscular build that suggested he spent serious time at the gym. "Thank you for confirming my identity," Morrison said. "That was smart. Can we come in?" I let them inside. Morrison introduced the other agent as Special Agent Marcus Williams. They both sat on my couch while I took the chair across from them, keeping the coffee table between us. "Mrs. Castellano," Morrison began, "we've been investigating Raymond Marchetti's organization for 3 years. We believe your husband was gathering evidence against them before his death. We need to know what you know." I felt my stomach clench. "What makes you think I know anything?" "Because someone in Marchetti's organization reported that you've been asking questions. You called Dennis Coyle. You've been seen at your husband's old office. And 2 days ago, you drove to a cabin in the Poconos and stayed for several hours. We have reason to believe your husband may have hidden evidence there." "You've been following me? We've been protecting you. Mrs. Castellano, you're in serious danger. Marchetti knows you're looking into your husband's death. The only reason you're still alive is because they're not sure yet what you've found. The moment they confirm you have evidence, they'll kill you. We can protect you, but we need you to cooperate." I studied Morrison's face, looking for any sign of deception. "How do I know you're not working for Marchetti? Michael's evidence shows the corruption goes all the way to the deputy police commissioner. For all I know, it includes FBI agents, too." Morrison glanced at Williams, then back at me. "That's a fair concern. But think about it logically. If we worked for Marchetti, you'd already be dead. We wouldn't be here trying to convince you to cooperate. We'd have taken the evidence by force and eliminated the problem. Unless you're trying to find out where the evidence is before you kill me." "Mrs. Castellano, Sarah, I understand you're scared. You should be. But I need you to trust me. We're the good guys. We want to bring Marchetti and everyone involved in his organization to justice, including the police officers and court officials who've been helping him. But we need evidence. We need what your husband collected." I made a decision. Maybe it was the wrong one, but I was out of options. I couldn't keep running, couldn't keep hiding. If Morrison was legitimate, she could help me finish what Michael started. If she wasn't, I was dead anyway. "I have the evidence," I said. "Everything Michael collected. Ledgers, recordings, photographs, documents. Years of proof. Morrison leaned forward. Where is it? First, I need to know something. How did Michael die? Really? Morrison and Williams exchanged a long look. Finally, Morrison spoke. We've been asking ourselves that same question. The official investigation ruled it an accident, but we've had doubts. The truck driver who hit your husband, Robert Kelly, has a gambling problem. He owes money to people connected to Marchetti's organization. The accident happened on a stretch of highway where there are no traffic cameras, and Kelly's injuries were minor despite the severity of the collision. You think Marchetti had him killed? We think it's possible, but we can't prove it. Kelly won't talk to us. He's terrified. And without evidence, it remains an unfortunate accident. I have evidence. Michael recorded a conversation where Dennis Coyle threatened him, where Coyle said, "Heroes die badly in this city." That was 1 month before Michael's death. Morrison's eyes lit up. That recording could be crucial. Sarah, we need everything you have, all of it. We'll put you in protective custody, relocate you if necessary. You'll be safe. I thought about Michael's letter, his warning not to trust anyone in Philadelphia, but Morrison worked out of the Philadelphia field office. She could be compromised, or she could be exactly what she claimed, an honest federal agent trying to do her job. I need 24 hours, I said. We don't have 24 hours. Marchetti. 24 hours. I'll make copies of everything and arrange for them to be distributed to multiple sources if anything happens to me. Then I'll give you the originals and put myself under your protection. But I need insurance. I need to know that if you're corrupt or if someone in your office is corrupt, the evidence will still come out. Morrison looked frustrated, but she nodded. I don't like it, but I understand. 24 hours. But Sarah, don't leave this apartment. Don't talk to anyone. We'll have agents watching your building. If you try to run, we can't protect you. I'm not running. I'm being careful. They left 15 minutes later. I watched from my window as they got into an unmarked sedan and drove away. Then I watched for the next hour, looking for any sign that I was still under surveillance. I saw nothing, which meant either they were very good at hiding, or Morrison had told the truth about protection. I spent that afternoon making multiple copies of everything. I uploaded files to 3 different cloud storage accounts. I burned everything onto DVDs and addressed envelopes to journalists at the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Washington Post, and the New York Times. I wrote detailed cover letters explaining the evidence and its significance, and I prepared packages for the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility in Washington, the Department of Justice's Public Integrity Section, and a civil rights organization that specialized in government corruption cases. If I disappeared, if I died, if I was silenced in any way, all of these packages would be mailed automatically. I used a service I'd found online that would send the packages if I didn't check in every 72 hours. It cost $300, but it was worth it for the insurance. By midnight, I was ready. Everything was copied, backed up, and distributed. The original evidence was packed in my backpack. I had one more thing to do before turning myself over to the FBI. I needed to visit Michael's grave. I drove to Holy Cross Cemetery around 1 a.m., parking far from Michael's grave and walking through the dark cemetery with only my phone's flashlight to guide me. It was risky, possibly stupid, but I needed to say goodbye, because after I gave the evidence to Morrison, my life would change forever. I'd be in protective custody, maybe witness protection. I'd be testifying in trials, reliving Michael's death over and over. I'd never be able to live normally again. I found Michael's headstone, simple granite with his name, dates, and the inscription, "Beloved husband and friend." I sat on the ground next to it, my back against the cold stone. I found it, I said quietly. I found everything you hid. And I'm going to finish what you started. These people won't get away with killing you. The cemetery was silent except for wind rustling through trees. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes, just being close to him, trying to feel some connection to the man I'd loved. Then I heard footsteps. I turned off my phone's light and pressed myself against the headstone, trying to become invisible. Someone was walking through the cemetery, moving quickly, purposefully, not the careful steps of someone visiting a grave, the determined stride of someone looking for something or someone. The footsteps stopped maybe 20 yards away. I heard a man's voice, quiet but audible in the still night. She was here. The grass is disturbed. Check the perimeter. Multiple sets of footsteps now spreading out. They were searching for me. I stayed frozen behind the headstone, barely breathing. My car was 300 yards away. If I ran for it, they'd see me. If I stayed here, they'd find me eventually. I made my decision. I took out my phone, keeping the brightness at minimum, and sent a text to the number Agent Morrison had given me. In danger. Holy Cross Cemetery. They found me. Then I ran. I sprinted between headstones, not caring about stealth anymore, just trying to put distance between myself and whoever was hunting me. Behind me, I heard shouts, then footsteps pounding in pursuit. I made it maybe 100 yards before someone tackled me from the side. We went down hard, my backpack digging into my spine, knocking the wind out of me. A heavy man in dark clothes pinned me to the ground. Got her, he called out. Then to me, the evidence, where is it? I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. I just stared up at him, terrified. The backpack, another voice said. I recognized it, Dennis Coyle. He appeared above me, looking down with cold satisfaction. Check the backpack. The man holding me down pulled my backpack off roughly and handed it to Coyle. Coyle unzipped it, pulled out the metal box, opened it. Everything's here, he said. The ledger, the USB drive, the tapes. Michael was even more thorough than we thought. What do we do with her? The man asked. Coyle looked at me and I saw my death in his eyes. Same as Michael. Make it look like an accident. Have Kelly do it. He owes us anyway. Another drunk driver, tragic loss, everyone moves on. No. That was a new voice, authoritative and commanding. I turned my head and saw Raymond Marchetti himself walking through the cemetery. He was smaller than I'd imagined, maybe 5'8", wearing an expensive suit that looked ridiculous in a graveyard at 1 a.m. But his presence was overwhelming. Everyone deferred to him immediately. Mr. Marchetti, Coyle said, she has all the evidence. We need to... I know what you think we need to do. I'm telling you we're not doing it. Marchetti looked down at me with something that might have been respect. Michael Castellano was a good man. He had principles. I admired that even though it made him an enemy. His widow deserves better than to die in a staged car accident. Then what? Let her go. Everyone stared at Marchetti. Coyle looked like he'd been slapped. Mr. Marchetti, she's a threat. She knows everything. She'll what? Go to the FBI? They already know most of this. We have people in place. She'll go to the press. They'll publish one story and move on. The system is bigger than any one investigation. Even if we lose a few soldiers, even if some people go to prison, the organization continues. That's how we've survived for 100 years. Marchetti reached down and offered me his hand. Stunned, I took it, and he pulled me to my feet. Mrs. Castellano, he said, I'm sorry about your husband. That wasn't my decision. Coyle and some others acted without my approval. They thought they were protecting the organization. Instead, they created this situation. If I'd known what they were planning, I would have stopped it. Michael wasn't a threat. He was just a man trying to do what he thought was right. I found my voice. You're letting me go. I'm letting you go. With the evidence. You can do whatever you want with it. Turn it over to the FBI, publish it, burn it. I don't care. Because here's what you'll learn, Mrs. Castellano. Justice is an illusion. Even if you expose everything, even if people go to prison, nothing really changes. There will always be men like me. There will always be corruption. Your husband died believing he could make a difference, but he was wrong. The system can't be fixed. It can only be managed. He handed me my backpack. Coyle looked furious, but said nothing. Go home, Marchetti said. Mourn your husband. Move on with your life, and remember that I showed you mercy when I didn't have to. He turned and walked away. The other men followed, leaving me standing alone in the cemetery, holding the evidence that had gotten Michael killed. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Then I heard sirens. Multiple vehicles pulled up to the cemetery entrance. FBI vehicles. Agent Morrison jumped out, gun drawn. Sarah, are you okay? I walked toward her on shaking legs. They were here. Marchetti, Coyle. They took the evidence and then gave it back. Marchetti let me go. Morrison holstered her weapon and grabbed my arm, leading me to her vehicle. We saw everything. We had surveillance on you from the moment you left your apartment. We were waiting to see who would show up. Are you hurt? No, just confused. Why did he let me go? Morrison shook her head. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. We have enough now. We recorded the entire conversation. We have Coyle admitting they killed your husband. We have Marchetti present at a clear attempt to intimidate a witness. Combined with your evidence, we can bring RICO charges against the entire organization. The trials took 3 years. Dennis Coyle was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, obstruction of justice, and money laundering. He received 25 years in federal prison. Thomas Ferraro got 18 years. Louis Bianchi turned state's evidence and received a reduced sentence of 8 years. 5 other lawyers were convicted on various charges. 3 judges were removed from the bench and faced criminal prosecution. Deputy Police Commissioner Anthony Russo was convicted of corruption and received 15 years. Raymond Marchetti was acquitted on the murder charges. His lawyers successfully argued he'd had no knowledge of Michael's death and had actually prevented my murder, demonstrating he wasn't the violent crime boss the prosecution claimed. But he was convicted on multiple counts of racketeering and money laundering and received 12 years in federal prison. He's currently serving his sentence in a minimum security facility in Pennsylvania. Robert Kelly, the truck driver who killed Michael, was granted immunity in exchange for his testimony. He admitted that he'd been coerced into causing the accident, told that his gambling debts would be forgiven if he did what he was told. He deliberately crossed lanes and hit Michael's car at high speed, then acted drunk at the scene. He sobbed on the witness stand when he described what he'd done. I don't know if I forgive him. I'm still working on that. I spent 18 months in protective custody, then another year in witness protection after credible threats were made against me. I testified at 7 separate trials. I was cross-examined by defense attorneys who tried to destroy my credibility, who suggested I'd fabricated evidence, who claimed I was motivated by money or revenge or mental illness. I sat in courtroom after courtroom, reliving the worst period of my life over and over, watching lawyers who'd helped kill my husband argue for their freedom. But Michael's evidence held up. Every ledger entry was verified. Every recording was authenticated. Every photograph was confirmed. The case the FBI built using Michael's work as the foundation was airtight. The Philadelphia Inquirer ran a series of articles about the corruption that won a Pulitzer Prize. The Washington Post published an in-depth investigation into organized crime's infiltration of legal systems across the country. Reforms were implemented, task forces were created. People talked about this being a turning point in the fight against corruption. But I think about what Marchetti said in that cemetery, about justice being an illusion, about the system being too big to fix, and I wonder if he was right. I live in Portland now. Different city, different life, different name, though I can tell you the old one since the witness protection ended last year. I work as a paralegal again for a small firm that specializes in environmental law. Simple work, clean work, nothing involving criminals or violence or corruption. I haven't been back to Philadelphia since the last trial ended. I sold the apartment, sold everything I couldn't carry, and left. My sister Caroline helped me relocate. She's the only person from my old life I still talk to regularly. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd never opened that first envelope, if I'd just thrown it away, assumed it was junk mail or a mistake. Would I be happier? Would I still be living in Philadelphia, working at my old job, visiting Michael's grave every week? Probably not. Marchetti's organization knew I existed. They would have come for me eventually once they were sure Michael hadn't told me anything. Opening that envelope and investigating didn't put me in danger. It saved my life by forcing everything into the open before they could quietly eliminate me. But there's a cost to knowing the truth. There's a cost to seeing how deeply corruption runs, how many people are complicit, how easily justice can be subverted. I can't watch crime dramas anymore without seeing the flaws, the unrealistic portrayals, the happy endings that never happen in real life. I can't trust authority figures without wondering who they're really working for. I can't believe in the system anymore because I've seen exactly how broken it is. Michael died believing he could make a difference. Maybe he did. Dozens of people went to prison because of his evidence. Reforms were implemented. Some good came from his death. But Marchetti was right about one thing. The organization continued. New lawyers stepped in to replace the ones who were convicted. New judges were corrupted. New police officers were bought. The structure remained even as individual components were replaced. 6 months ago, I read an article about a mob trial in Philadelphia. Different defendants, different lawyers, same story. Another acquittal that shouldn't have happened. Another case where witnesses mysteriously recanted or disappeared. I wanted to feel outraged. I wanted to feel like I should do something, investigate, expose the corruption all over again. Instead, I felt tired. I've done my part. I've testified, I've cooperated, I've helped put bad people in prison. I can't spend the rest of my life fighting a system that doesn't want to be fixed. Michael couldn't save it, and neither can I. So I live quietly in Portland. I go to work, I come home. I see a therapist twice a month to deal with the PTSD. I'm dating someone, a teacher named David, who doesn't know about my past, who thinks Sarah Mitchell is just a paralegal, who moved to Portland for a fresh start. Maybe someday I'll tell him the truth. Maybe not. The metal box with Michael's original evidence sits in a storage unit outside Portland. I visit it sometimes just to remind myself that everything really happened, that I didn't imagine the whole nightmare. The ledger, the USB drive, the tapes, they're all still there. Physical proof that my husband was a hero who died trying to do the right thing. Last week I received a letter. No return address. Postmarked from Philadelphia. Inside was a single piece of paper with a message in those same block letters I'd seen years ago. He would be proud of you. I don't know who sent it. Agent Morrison, someone from the FBI, a journalist who covered the trials, or maybe someone from Marchetti's organization, letting me know they're still watching, still aware I exist. I burned the letter in my sink and washed the ashes down the drain, because the truth is, I don't want to know who sent it. I don't want to be pulled back into that world. I don't want to spend my life looking over my shoulder, wondering if the blue Impala has been replaced by a gray sedan, if the man in the coffee shop is surveillance or just another customer, if the knock on my door at 2 a.m. is someone bringing another envelope or something worse. Michael would be proud of me. I believe that. I finished what he started. I made sure his death meant something. I made sure the people who killed him faced consequences, but I also abandoned the fight. I walked away. I let the system continue corrupting itself, while I built a safe, quiet life 3,000 miles away. Is that courage or cowardice, justice or survival? I honestly don't know. What I do know is this: sometimes there are no good answers. Sometimes you do everything right and still don't win. Sometimes the bad guys go to prison, but the system that created them remains intact. Sometimes justice isn't about victory, it's just about making sure the truth doesn't die with you. Michael hid evidence in a metal box under a woodpile because he knew the truth was more important than his safety. He knew someone had to remember, had to document, had to ensure that when he was gone, the story wouldn't be buried with him. I've told you his story now. I've told you about the envelope, the ledger, the surveillance, the threats, the trials, everything. It's not a story with a satisfying ending. There's no moment where justice triumphs and evil is vanquished forever. There's just compromise and partial victories, and the exhausting realization that the fight never really ends. But the story is told. The truth is out there. And if nothing else, Michael Castellano's name will be remembered as someone who tried to stand against corruption when it would have been easier to look away. That has to be enough, because it's all any of us can do. Document the truth, bear witness, and hope that somewhere, somehow, someone is listening. My name is Sarah Castellano. My husband was murdered for trying to expose corruption in Philadelphia. I finished his work, and now I'm trying to figure out how to live with what I know. Some days are easier than others. Today is not one of the easy ones. I'm standing in my Portland apartment, looking out at rain falling on unfamiliar streets, holding a cup of coffee and thinking about a man I loved who died believing in something I'm not sure exists anymore. Justice, fairness, truth, the belief that one person can make a difference. Maybe Michael was right. Maybe those things do exist, somewhere, somehow, even if I can't see them clearly anymore. Or maybe Marchetti was right, and it's all an illusion, a story we tell ourselves to feel better about a fundamentally broken world. I don't have the answer. All I have is this story, this truth, this testimony that my husband lived and died trying to do something good, and the knowledge that when they came for me in that cemetery, when they had every reason to kill me and make the evidence disappear forever, Raymond Marchetti, a mobster, a criminal, someone who'd built his empire on violence and corruption, showed me mercy. I think about that moment a lot. Try to understand it. Was it strategic, moral, whimsical? Did he let me go because he genuinely believed the system was too broken for my evidence to matter? Or because he saw something in me, some echo of Michael's principled stubbornness, that earned his respect? I'll never know. And maybe that's the real ending to the story. Not justice, not victory, not revenge or closure or any of the things we're told we're supposed to want. Just uncertainty, just questions, just the uncomfortable truth that the world is more complicated than we want it to be. And sometimes the bad guys let you live and you never understand why. Michael's grave has fresh flowers on it every week, placed there by someone I've never met. Rita sends them, I found out from Caroline, who still has contacts in Philadelphia. Michael's old office manager, who was too afraid to talk to me when it mattered, makes sure he's remembered. I haven't been back to visit. I'm not sure I ever will. But I think about him every day. Wonder what he'd say about how everything turned out, whether he'd be satisfied with the convictions, disappointed by the continuance of corruption, or simply glad that I survived. I like to think he'd understand why I left, why I changed my name, moved across the country, and built a life that has nothing to do with law or justice or fighting corruption. Why I chose survival over continued warfare. But I also think he'd want me to tell this story, to make sure people know what happened, to document the truth, even if the truth is complicated and unsatisfying and doesn't offer the kind of closure we've been conditioned to expect. So that's what I've done. This is the story of my husband, Michael Castellano, who tried to expose corruption in Philadelphia and was murdered for it. This is the story of how I finished his work, put dangerous people in prison, and watched the system absorb the damage and continue functioning as if nothing had changed. This is the story of how organized crime works in America, how lawyers and judges and police officers can be bought, and how one person's evidence can make a difference, even if it doesn't fix everything. And this is the story of how I learned that justice isn't always about winning. Sometimes it's just about refusing to let the truth die quietly. Michael didn't let the truth die. He risked everything to document it, preserve it, and ensure it would outlive him. I didn't let his sacrifice mean nothing. I faced the people who killed him. I testified against them. I made sure they were held accountable, even if the accountability was incomplete and the system remained broken. Now I'm telling you, whoever you are, wherever you are, I'm trusting you with this truth, with this story, with this complicated, unsatisfying, painfully honest account of what really happens when ordinary people try to fight corruption. What you do with it is up to you. Maybe you'll be inspired to fight your own battles against injustice. Maybe you'll be discouraged by how little one person can accomplish. Maybe you'll just file this away as an interesting story and move on with your life. All of those responses are valid, because the truth is, I don't know what the moral of this story is supposed to be. I don't know if Michael was a hero or a fool. I don't know if I did the right thing by continuing his work, or if I should have burned the evidence and protected myself. I don't know if the system can be fixed, or if Marchetti was right, that it's fundamentally broken beyond repair. I just know what happened, and I know someone needs to remember. So I'm telling you, I'm documenting it, I'm bearing witness, and now the story is yours. What you do with it is your choice. Just like it was Michael's choice to hide that evidence instead of staying silent. Just like it was my choice to open that envelope instead of throwing it away. Just like every choice we make when we're confronted with uncomfortable truths and impossible decisions. Some days, I wish I'd made different choices, easier choices, safer choices, but most days, I'm glad I didn't, because whatever else happened, whatever the cost, at least the truth survived. And sometimes in a world full of lies and corruption and people who profit from keeping things hidden, that's enough. It has to be enough. My name is Sarah Castellano. I used to live in Philadelphia, and this is what I know to be true.